Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here.
Hello everyone, this is Dipankar Kushari. I am a senior specialist solutions architect with Databricks, and today I am going to talk about integrating Microsoft Purview with Databricks. I'll also show you how to set up Databricks Unity Catalog and Hive Metastore as sources in Microsoft Purview, and then how to scan Unity Catalog and Hive Metastore and hydrate the Purview Data Catalog. We refer Unity Catalog as UC and Hive Metastore as HMS during this discussion. So as of now, hydrating metadata is the only feature available from Unity Catalog to Purview, and this is how the roadmap looks like for the future, where lineage information from UC will be available in Purview. And then in the next phase, there will be provision for security policies defined in Purview to be pushed to Databricks Unity Catalog for enforcement. Now let's take a look at a high level how Purview scans the data assets from Databricks. For scanning Hive Metastore from Databricks, you have to register a source as Hive in Purview. You fill up the details so that Purview can connect to the HMS and discover the data assets. For HMS scanning, we would need to set up a self-hosted integration runtime. For scanning Unity Catalog, you have to register a source as Databricks. Currently, as of recording this video, it is in private preview. You fill up the details so that Purview can connect to UC and discover the data assets. For UC scanning, you don't really need to set up a hosted integration runtime, but Azure provides a auto-resolved integration runtime. With that, let's now take a look at how the setup is done. So here we are in a Databricks workspace. It's Microsoft Azure Databricks. And in this workspace, we have few catalogs, including the Hive Metastore catalog. And within the catalog, we have this Kushari HMS database or schema. And then we have other catalogs. These are Unity catalog hosted in the Unity catalog Metastore. And here we have Kushari schema. So what we are going to do in Purview is we are going to scan this Kushari HMS as being a source of Hive Metastore. And we are also going to scan Kushari schema in Purview as Unity catalog Metastore. So let's move to Purview. And before we do that, let's take a look at few things in Azure Portal. So here you can see we have already created a Purview application called Purview UC, and I have the necessary permissions to create sources or register sources and also scan sources. So when you launch into Purview, you have this menu on the left hand side. You have data catalog, data map. You actually have data estate insights, data policy, and management. So we'll mostly focus on data map and data catalog as well as management here. So first we are going to show you how to scan Hive Metastore. So for that, what we needed to do, as I discussed earlier, we needed to create a integration runtime, and also we needed to create a credential. So in the data map, if you go in the data map, you will see there is integration runtimes, and here this is a self-hosted integration runtime. Now I'm using a Mac here, so I had to provision a VM where I hosted this integration runtime. I followed the instructions in the documentation and I was able to set it up fairly quickly. Once I set up the integration runtime, so let me show you. If I click on new, you have two options, either Azure or self-hosted. So I chose self-hosted, then I click on continue, I gave a name, and then I just click on create. It gives me two keys, and using those keys, I was able to set up the integration runtime on the Azure VM. And in that VM, I have to provide those keys to authenticate, and now it's running. That's what it is showing here. So that's one thing you have to do to be able to register Hive Metastore as source. Another thing we have to do is to create a credential. I'll come back to this later. Let's just go to the map. And the first thing we will do, I already have Hive Metastore identified as a source, but we will go back to it and do it again. So in this case, I will just click on edit source, and then you see when you, this is basically the screen. So let me go back and go here, sources. So this is how you register a new source, by clicking on register, and then if you scroll down, you will see Hive Metastore. So then you will click on continue, and now we are at that position where when I was trying to edit the source, it landed me there. So it's asking for Hive cluster URL. So basically it's asking for a compute which it will use to scan, right? So in this case, we are going to give this compute here, which I already have created, and this is the compute that I used. And let me start this. So let us get started. But once I created the compute and I provided that details. So basically, this is the detail that will go the up to this .NET. This is what will go here, Hive cluster URL. So let me actually cancel this out. So now you know how to register a Hive source. Now let me show you here, which will be easier for you. So I'll do the ID source again. And as you can see, it's ADB and then 6.26.6 Azure Databricks.net, basically the URL for the workspace. And then this Hive Metastore server URL is basically this when you are in the cluster is JDBC ODBC and you take up to this. So that's your server URL. So and then you can basically identify a collection. So anything that is scanned as part of this source will be saved in those collection. Collection is nothing but you can think of it more like a grouping of assets, data assets. So let me show you. So you can just go here and create a collection. You can identify a collection admin, and then you can use the collection like I showed you. You can also use the collection while you scan a particular Metastore. Now, in this case, let me go back to the source and go back here. And again, going back to edit source. So this is how we created the source. Let me cancel it out. Now, when I have to scan it after you register the source, then you can either do a new scan or you can edit the scan. So I already scanned it and I'm going to use that. But if I do an edit scan, it basically brings up the page that I used, the information that I used for scanning. Before that, let me again do the same thing like I did for source. Let me do a new scan, and this is the page that opens up, and you then fill up that. So now let me go back and show you that scan that I already did. It is easier to show you that way. So when you are trying to create a new scan, it's basically going to give you this integration runtime. If it is running, it will go give you this integration runtime in the drop down. So you already created the integration runtime I showed you earlier in the data map. You just get that in the drop down and use it. Next, credentials. So before I go into the details, let me show you something which is very important here for setting up Hive Metastore. This is still running, but what I did earlier, let me actually take advantage of that. So when you have the cluster up and running, you will have these apps which is going to be enabled. And when you get into the app, you actually have a place where you can find this file which has the details for the Hive Metastore that is hosted on Azure Databricks. And that details is available, which is this file. So I'll show you that. But let's see what are the information that we can get out of it, right? So the first thing that we wanted here, oh, okay, so it's already running. So let's go here, apps, web terminal, and this. So this is the same file that I downloaded and saved it in the Visual Studio Code for easy access, right? So let's now go back to the Purview and let's show you. So the first thing I wanted is the credentials. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code and let's show you. So you can see that here you have the username, which is the value is this, and here is the password. Okay, so that's the database where the Hive Metastore is, the details of the Hive Metastore is stored or the hosted, right? That MariaDB database, that's where these details will be used to access that information, right? So Purview needs that information to access it. So what I did, let me cancel this out. So how this credential is coming, right? So let me cancel this out. Let me go back to the management, and as I told you earlier, the credentials are stored here. So what I did, I created this Kushari HMS crate, right? But to create that, I really needed a key vault. So let me go back to the key vault. I already have a key vault, Kushari KV. Here I saved a secret, which is Kushari HMS secret. And this is where I actually saved that information I just showed you from the Visual Studio. That I just saved the password. And then here, when I created this, so let me click on new and let me give a name. And in this case, I'm going to select basic authentication. So this is the username, right? So the username will be this. So this is where your username will go. And then you select the key vault and then you put the secret name. So in this case, I will put the secret name as this, right? So, and then I can do create. I am not going to create that, but this is exactly how I did it. Again, you get the details of the Hive Metastore that is hosted on Databricks by going into this, and then all the details I saved in Microsoft Visual Studio Code, and there look for the connection username. That's the username. So you get the username, you put it here. You already created the key vault in your Azure Portal. That's where you have stored your secret, which is nothing but the password from here. This password here, which you stored as a key vault, and then in the key vault as a secret, and then you are just going to use that secret name here to create the credential. So once you created the basic authentication credential, that's what you will use. So let me go back here, go back to the source, and again use the same scan but do an edit scan. So that's easy. Now you have the Kushari HMS crate. Now when you created the VM, here you are going to use this VM for everything that the Hive Metastore is looking for, because your integration runtime is running here, right? So here, if you see, um, I have Java installed. So there are some prerequisites that you need to fill up. Now also, I have a requirement to store the jar. This is the MariaDB jar that has a class which is being used to access the Hive Metastore. So again, taking advantage of the Visual Studio. So if you see here, I have the driver class, right? And then the jar file, in the documentation you will be able to see, you have to download that jar file and then you have to store it somewhere. In my case, I stored it in this C windows in the VM inside jars. So all you have to give is the location, not the name of the file, but just the location where this MariaDB Java client jar is located, right? So that's what I did. Metastore JDBC driver location. So the driver is stored in the form of a jar in C jars, and then the driver class. Again, driver class is you are getting from here, right? And now you have to create the JDBC URL. So there is also in the documentation it mentions how to do that. So one thing it says, remove this ampersand amp, just remove this part. So if I copy it, let me copy this and let me show you how this has been created. Um, so if you see, up to this point, only thing I removed is ampersand, right? And then at the end, I downloaded this CRT file, which it says where it is located. So I downloaded it from Databricks Common MySQL CRT, and I uploaded it into my VM. And then one more thing they say is that use this forward slash, because in Windows they use backward slash. So if I go back to this, you will see that C CRT. So if I do this, you see it's backward slash, but here you have to change it to forward slash. So you have to give the whole path, including the file name. So that's where I kept the file. So that's what you will be doing when you formulate the JDBC URL. And then the database name, again, the database name is available here. Database name is basically this up to the question mark. So once you get the database name, then you put it here. And finally, the schema. So this is where you will decide, like I was saying earlier. So let me open a duplicate tab. Let me go to data, change to SQL persona, go to data, Hive Metastore. So I am interested about this D Kushari HMS. So that's what I said, D Kuchari HMS. And then how much memory? I chose 1 GB. And then, as I told you, you can choose where you want to collect this. So in this case, already the source has during creating the source, we said we want to collect it in this HMS D Kushari collection. So that's what we are doing. Next, what you can do click on this test connection, and it will test the connection to make sure that it is properly connected or getting connected with all these details, with the URL, with the database name, with the driver class using the JDBC driver, that schema, and the credentials. Using the runtime that is running on the VM, it's able to connect to the Hive Metastore, which is hosted in Databricks. Once it can connect to that Azure Databricks hosted Hive Metastore, then you can move forward and you can decide how frequently you want to scan it. So it sometimes takes little longer to connect, so we'll have to give some time. Okay, so the connection is successful. I can click on continue. Now you can decide, as I was saying earlier, you can decide on the frequency whether you want to do it multiple times on a regular schedule or just once. In our case, we'll just say once and save and run. To save time, I'm just going to click cancel and use a previous run or scan that I have done. So this was the scan. This was done earlier and it says it's completed. It took 1 minute 44 seconds. So if I click on that, it shows little more details about it. Now remember, I collected this. So if you remember, I collected this in HMS Kusari collection. So let's go to that collection and see what exactly has been scanned. So if I go to HMS Kushari collection, I see that 7 asset has been scanned. It is connected to one source and one scan has been performed so far, which we know that HMS scan has been performed. Now if we click on the asset, it actually shows what it has scanned or which data asset it has discovered. So it has discovered these signs are tables. So it has discovered these tables, it has discovered this database, and also it has discovered this particular workspace, right? So we can close this here. We if we want to browse it, better place is to do it from the data catalog, and then you have the option browse. So here you can click on this HMS, and here you can say that I want to filter on only tables. So these are the tables. This came from Hive Metastore source. That's what it shows here. I can click on one of these tables. It shows more details that this is part of the D Kushari HMS, which is absolutely correct, which is under this Hive server that is hosted in that particular workspace in Databricks. And then I can look at more properties like what columns are there, what is the name of the database, when it was created, whether it's a temporary table or not, and so on and so forth. I can even look at the schema and the data type. I can even look at related. So it is related to this database, and these are the other tables in the database. From here, I can go to another table, and again the same thing. I can click on overview to look at it. I can click on this link to go up there. So that's pretty much it, how you register the HMS source or Hive Metastore source, and then how you can scan the source to discover certain data assets. Now let's switch gear and look at how you can do a similar thing with Unity Catalog. So again, for Unity Catalog, you will first start with registering a source. You will say Azure Databricks, and in this case, this is in private preview, so be mindful of that. And then you fill up the subscription details to the Azure Databricks, and you put the Azure Databricks Workspace name. Once you let me show you. If you fill up a specific workspace, it actually populates the URL it knows, and then you can decide where you want to collect all the data assets that is going to be scanned by Purview. So we'll cancel it out. Again, the same way, we'll go to the view details and we'll show you what we have populated. So we populated the subscription, we populated the workspace name, it automatically filled up the URL, and we are going to collect it in this collection. But in this case, I can also decide the collection at the scan level, right? So in the scan level, I created this scan, and let me show you that it is much easier. So again, let's do the same thing what we did for HMS, where let's create a new scan. So let's first I showed you how to register a new UC source or Azure Databricks source. Now let's start a new scan. In this case, we'll choose Unity Catalog. So you see there is self-hosted integration runtime that is required. It's just auto-populates. And then in this case, you will use a PAT token on which you will create at the Databricks Workspace. So in this case, we are going to choose. So here the difference is, you see earlier it was basic authentication for HMS or Hive Metastore. This is access token. So you are going to choose, we are going to choose actually DB access token, and we have to give an HTTP path. So what is it, HTTP path? This is HTTP path is nothing but if we go to the SQL and choose SQL warehouse. So here we are using UC test, going to connection details. This is the HTTP path that it is asking for. Again, the compute that it will use to scan, right? And then you can choose where you want to store your, or which collection you want to store your discovered data set. So let's cancel it out. Let's go to the scan. So source scans, actually let's go into this scan and then let's show you. So again, the same thing, Unity Catalog, this gets auto populated. We had the PAT token or Databricks personal access token stored. Actually, before that, let me show you. So in the management, in credentials, again the same way like we did for D Kushari KV, we stored this personal access token in another key vault. So if I click here and try to create, so you see by default it says access token, again test, and I can choose the key vault, and I can pretty much enter the secret name here to create a credential. So that's exactly what we did. Going back to data map, the source, again, I am not going to do new scan. I'm just going to do edit scan for now. Choose the Unity catalog. It gets auto populated. The credentials are already available, not basic authentication, but the access token. Then, as I showed you earlier, give the path to the warehouse. And now at the scan level also, you can choose, because at the source level, it just said use the root collection, but I'm more inclined to choose the UC Kushari collection, so I can do that. And then you can do test collection. It's much faster, and then you can just to continue. Ignore that. It's just saying that it cannot connect, but Sometimes it happens, it's still in preview. So exactly. So now here you are able to see different um, catalogs within the Unity catalog, and then you can choose. So in our case, we chose main, and then the database which is under. So let me go back here. Under main, D Kushari schema is our choice. At this point, we can only filter it at the catalog level. So I'm not going to scan it. I'm just going to show you. So this scan was run. It completed in 1 minute 19 seconds. Now let's go back in collections and see what exactly it has scanned. So it has scanned 9 assets. Um, so if I go, let's see what it has captured. So here again, it captured the default schema. It captured the main catalog. It is captured the LF Unity catalog. That's basically the Metastore. So if you look at the hierarchies, this is the Azure Databricks Metastore. So let's go back to the collection, UC collection, assets, and let's go to one of the tables. If you see the hierarchy, you will see that Databricks price is within the Databricks schema, which is within the catalog main, and that catalog belongs to this Metastore. Again, I can look at the properties of that particular table, and I can even go back to the schema itself, and I can say related, and it shows all the tables in that schema. And then I can click on Databricks dinner, and I can click on menu, and so on and so forth. And then I can come back here. I can go to the data catalog, browse, and I can say you see D Kushari catalog. I can filter on tables, so it only shows those tables, and I can click one of those. Again, the same view where I can see the properties and schema, and lineage is not available as we said, and which is going to be available later this year, and then related. And interestingly, one of my colleague was able to actually write some custom code to create the lineage. So let me show you that. So if I search for dinner, and then let me go to UC lineage related, let me go to dinner price. Let me show you. So with that custom code, he has created a table level lineage where you can see that dinner and price both are being joined together. To these are notebook IDs, by the way, to create the dinner price. And then we can go to the notebook, and we can look at it from the notebook perspective. But basically, we can also, so if you see, it says switch to asset. Basically, that's how we are switching. So that's about it today. I hope you enjoyed, and hope this was helpful. Thank you so much, and don't hesitate to contact me if you have more questions.